Hey everybody. Hi everybody, welcome. We've been talking about different types of storage in AWS. Started out with block storage. There's a video on that. We went to file storage, file sharing environments that you may have using Elastic File System. And now I thought we'll talk about the other big one, object storage. And AWS uses object storage within their environments as well. And I thought that it is time that we talk about this big monster, S3. S3. And at the bottom, you'll see that there's an endpoint, and that endpoint is quite important. There's a couple of things that we can speak about over here. The fact that we have this endpoint over there, and what I have is my bucket name. Now, your bucket name needs to be unique globally. Although S3, your bucket, it is a zonal service, so it will be in a certain region, in an availability zone, and spread across that. We'll talk about that shortly. But the bucket name itself is globally unique. And then you have a prefix. The prefix is you may have multiple, typically what we used to call folders. I can arrange multiple folders within this S3 bucket. Maybe for one, I can say that this is a prefix for finance, and I could have a prefix for HR, and I could have those prefixes within that bucket as well. So see that as folders. And then we've got the bucket name. The bucket name could be something, or the object name rather. And that could be the file name dot JPEG, right? It could be, that could be the file name dot JPEG. So we could have this coming up within our environment as an endpoint, and they could be talking about prefixes as well. And it's actually cool to know that they exist. I actually just want to move that a bit more that way, and then move that over there as well. So we have prefixes, and those prefixes we go and we use them within the AWS environment. There we go. That file name looks a lot better there at the bottom. Now, I've got the prefixes in there. I've got my folders in there. That gets used many times by developers. I maybe have a prefix of year and then another one in there for all of the months in that year and then all of the days in there. So if I do a search, I can target an exact day by coding in the prefixes in there as well. So there's definite usage for that. So this is typically an endpoint in S3, and then we can start looking at this different storage classes. Now, storage classes is extremely important. You start off with standard, then standard infrequent access. And what you do with that, standard is the most expensive way, and then standard infrequent, it gets cheaper. One zone, infrequent access gets cheaper, and it gets cheaper the further down you go. Intelligent tiering is slightly different. What intelligent tiering is, it is the ability to go and let S3 decide which one of those tiers it should be moving your objects into. Let's talk about standard. Standard, what happens there, this is the most expensive way, but your data is available within milliseconds, and it is available in availability zones, 3 availability zones. You get standard infrequent access. This is a bit cheaper, and it is also available within milliseconds, and we'll also make that and keep it in 3 availability zones. One zone available in milliseconds, but it is stored now only in 1 availability zone. When you see the word glacier, think of archival. Glacier is where you will go and archive your typical data in. If you see Glacier, think archive. If you see archive, think Glacier as far as S3 is concerned. Instant retrieval available within milliseconds. Flexible retrieval is between 5 minutes and 12 hours. Glacier Deep is available 12 hours, etc. So there are different storage classes, and the further down in the storage classes you go, the cheaper it is for you to have your objects in S3. Most of your data, there's a benchmark that most of your data is actually not being used frequently. So for cost purposes, you want to move it over to one of the other storage classes below standard. Then from there, we've got your storage classes. One of the other things that we can look at as well is maybe use cases. Some of the use cases is that it's great for media file objects, videos, movies, used as a content delivery network as well. And the origin for that and it is typically used for those big, massive files. Companies like Pinterest uses this as well as a means for them to have a whole lot of photos in there. It's used for archiving and then also backup and recovery purposes as well, as far as use cases are concerned. Multiple others, you can store any kind of file in there. It gets stored as an object in S3. Security, there is a lot of security built into S3. It is a given. So when I go and I create a bucket, there is no public access to anybody. I have to make two changes. I have to go make that bucket public available, and I have to go into the properties, the permissions of that bucket, and say disable for block public access. And I also have to do that on an account level as well. Further security is I could have an identity-based policy. So I could have a user Bob, and I could say, Bob, I give access to that S3 bucket. You could also do a resource-based policy where I'll go to this S3 bucket and I'll assign a policy on that S3 bucket to say, on that S3 bucket, I am allowing, or am I allowing, Bob will have access to this bucket, and this is the type of access that you will have with the action word that we have in there, and Bob will have access to that. There's also encryption. The most cost-effective ways to use SSE S3, server-side encryption S3. There's KMS, there's dual-layer KMS server-side encryption as well. And then there's server-side encryption customer where you encrypt your data already. So multiple different means to secure both on the bucket level, both on the user level, and then you can encrypt your objects in your buckets as well. So those are two means for you to do that. And then we can also look at features. There is a lot of features with S3. For instance, it has versioning. I can have multiple versions of a file in there, and you can then roll back and download a previous version and then upload it. So there is no accidental deletes. You have lifecycle policies. So with these classes that you have over there, I could have a lifecycle policy to say, after 30 days that it's been in standard, 30 days later, I want to move it to standard infrequent. And you can set up these lifecycle policies to say, after 60 days, I want to move it to standard flexible or instant retrieval. And then after 90 days, I want to move it to flexible retrieval, and then move it after 180 days to deep glacier as well. That is your lifecycle policies that you can create. It's quite easy to do that as well. It's quite graphical where you can see the flow of your objects in S3. As replication of S3 objects, so you can replicate to the same region replication. You can also do cross-region replication as well. Multi-part upload is really quite a cool thing that you can do. Imagine if you have, let's say, for instance, you have one file and it is a let's say it is a 100 meg file. Now, 100 meg is actually a good file size for you to do multi-part upload, because what you do then is you go and you say, fine, now I will go split that into equal parts of 25 meg, and yep, my 25 meg visually doesn't look right, but hey, then I can go and upload each one of these individually in multi-parts. And if one of them fails, let's say the last one failed and it didn't go through, I just need to go and re-upload that one part. So it's a more efficient way to upload your big files, and maybe areas where you've got low bandwidth, it is a good idea to do this. Now, multi-part upload, you cannot do via the console, so it must be via your SDK or the command line. Just a note on that, many times in the exams, they try and trick you with that question as well. Then there's also transfer accelerator. Now imagine I have in another region, let's draw out a region, my red region, and I will go draw out a red region. There's my red region. It's a smaller one, and I am fairly close to that region. Maybe this is me in that region, and yep, I'll let you know that this is me. That's me in that region. And it's a very small region that we have, but it's close to me. And what we can do with Transfer Accelerator is to create one that says, I will post, and if I need to send this to the big region as maybe overseas, far away from me, I can send that object via that local small region. Between AWS and the regions, they've got big fat pipes, and those big fat pipes that they have allows me to make use of that. So I can use their environment and then send that file up into that S3 bucket and then have my data in there. There's my red file in there. There's my object. So I've got my object, and I've used AWS's infrastructure to send that up a lot faster than me sending it over the internet. So that's transfer acceleration that you can, or accelerator that you can use. Then it also has event notification. Now I've just uploaded this object into this S3 bucket. That is an event. It's a put event. I could let something else happen. So the moment this file was put into this bucket, S3 could have triggered a Lambda function to say, add a watermark, create a thumbnail out of that image as well. So you can trigger events and run different services to do different things for you. Maybe write out the metadata to a database as well. Multiple different functions that you can do with that. And then I also lastly want to just chat about cost too, because it is fairly important in S3 as well. So then there's cost. I could, for instance, there are different types of costs involved with this. So certain things that bears a cost for me would be the data class type and the class that I have it in. So when I go and I have data in there, that storage of that data, I pay for that. If I move data in and out of my AWS environment, out of the region, I pay for that. If it is maybe to a service in the same region, there are some caveats where you don't pay for that at all. Data transfer out of that region as well, I pay for that. Management and analytics, we spoke about transfer, we spoke about having things like a lifecycle policy where there's intelligent tiering as well. All of those carry cost. It might be very small amounts, but they still carry cost. Replication as well as versioning, some of the features that we mentioned as well. There's versioning and there's replication. You pay for those as well. So in a nutshell, this speaks to S3, it speaks to the service itself, and some of the most important things that you need to remember. From my side, my biggest tip to you is to set up a lifecycle policy so that you can move your objects from the most expensive storage class to the least expensive storage classes. Note that there is a lot of security built in that I can add it on a user. I can also add a policy on that bucket as well. And there's some brilliant features with S3 as well that you can use. Note your bucket name, it must be lowercase. There are other criteria to the bucket name as well that you need to adhere to. This is S3, quick one. Hopefully you find it some use to this, and again, it may help you with your exam. Cheers, until the next one. Bye.